What made you go back to politics?
Putin, I'll be very frank with you. Had Russia not attacked Ukraine, I would not have run for president of Finland. This was built in the 1800s later, when the Tsar took over the palace. Wow. And this is mirroring the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, but it's called the Hall of Mirrors, so we have the mirrors on the side.
So do you ever get used to it, or do you sometimes just walk in and think, wow, this is...
Every morning, wow, this is.
Have a seat. Talk to me about resilience.
It's something I think we in Finland know something about, actually. It's one of our key words. It's sisu, which is resilience, perseverance, grit, stamina. So you never give up. You just have to keep on pushing and grinding through the tough stuff. And I think a lot of Finns have that ingrained into the system, because remember, we're a poor country. First we were under Sweden for 700 years, then under Russia for a little bit over 100. And when we gained independence in 1917, we were basically a poor developing country. And I think then this sort of idea of resilience, let's try to overcome, let's work hard, came very much a part of Finnish DNA. And I think I'm still part of that generation.
Alexander Stubb is the sitting president of Finland, but he's also served as the country's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. On a bigger stage, Stubb was also a member of the European Parliament, and more recently, he found himself nestled as an unlikely diplomatic force between superpowers. President Stubb has US President Trump's ear on issues like the Russian war with Ukraine. In his spare time, Stubb unwinds with exercise, a lot of it. He's also competed in Ironman events and marathons with some pretty impressive results for a non-pro athlete.
I want to ask about your father. He was someone that had a huge influence on your life. What was he like?
Yeah, definitely. Still is. He's 90 years old. He was the chief talent scout of the National Hockey League in Europe. So very much an ice hockey family, if you will. My dad was a big influence in the sense that he taught me a lot of things. He's always taught me curiosity. He's tried to teach me patience.
So you're naturally curious, but not naturally patient.
Yeah, I think that's what my wife would probably say. I was very much into sports when I was a kid. First I wanted to become a professional ice hockey player, but my dad probably saw that, it's not going to work with that one. Then I wanted to become a professional golfer. That's why I actually went to study in the States. And my sort of mission or academic life or meaning, purpose, only started pretty much at the age of 21. I mean, before that, I lived in a, teenage abyss, I guess, in many ways. And if you had asked my friends in high school or elsewhere that, will Alex go into politics or will he become president, they would have probably laughed.
What was your hardest time?
One of the tough times, to be very frank with you, was when my mother was diagnosed with epilepsy when I was only 10, 11 years old. I was the first one to see my mom with a seizure, so that gives you a different picture of, your parent in one way or another. But probably the toughest time in my life, and it's only my own doing, was from 2014 to 2016 when I was Prime Minister and Finance Minister and Chairman of the party. Probably not in my comfort zone because domestic politics was never my thing. But I, grinded it out for 2 years, and when I lost an election, I left politics. But I left sort of, with a high morale to a certain extent, lessons learned, and my whole idea was, okay, the time was tough. I learned something from it, and I'll never come back to politics. And here I am.
I was going to say, and then 7 years later, here we are.
With Russia, I realized that, wow, things might happen. And I felt that sense of duty, but we talked about it at home, my wife, and because we had decided that we're not going to do politics. And she said, well, perhaps because the security political situation is what it is, you should reconsider.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
This is Putin announcing Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
Кто бы ни пытался помешать нам, а тем более создать угрозы для нашей страны, для нашего народа, должны знать, что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались.
This war is a continuation of conflicts exploited by Russia.
Heavily armed, wearing camouflage uniforms of a kind known to be issued to the Russian military, a platoon of troops deployed this morning around the main airport in Crimea.
Finland shares a 1,340-kilometer border with Russia. They've been investing in their defense forces for years. April 4, 2023. Finland officially joined NATO.
If and when the alliance defines its number one security threat as being Russia, we in Finland fully realize our responsibility. So my message to all of our allies here today is that you can trust us.
Where do you see Russia going?
Oh, it's not looking good. You know, I'm very honest with you. With the current regime and with President Putin, I don't see big change. You know, nations that don't have a capacity to deal with their past, they have a very difficult time to look into the future.
The world marvels as tiny Finland halts and holds the giant invader. Soviets may command the sky of Finland, but the invader will meet resistance on Finnish soil.
There is this, you know, imperialist DNA and undertone in Russia, which doesn't seem to go away. Russia is built on empire. That's why Putin talks about the Ruski Mir, Great Russia, borders to the 1800s, which has, you know, one language, one Russia, one religion, and one leader himself. So I'm not very hopeful about the future of Russia right now. You know, we thought that Russia and many other countries in this world would just automatically revert to some form of liberal democracy, but it didn't happen. For some people who don't know the Finnish model, the president runs foreign policy together with the government. And I'm the only living person who has been in Finland, who's been both prime minister and president and foreign minister. So I understand the reality. When you're president and dealing with foreign policy, and foreign policy for a country like Finland is existential, everyone wants the president to succeed. Ukraine wants peace. Finland wants peace. Europe wants peace. The United States wants peace. Russia, on the other hand, still has to show that it wants a genuine peace.
The countryside surrounding this Russian-Finnish border is eerily silent and still. The border closed in the second half of 2023. All traffic stopped between these neighboring countries. No cars, no pedestrians, no buses, indefinitely. And the perimeter is manned by authorities on both sides.
I'm Captain Antti Vahe. I'm head of Nuijamaa border guard station. Days before closing the border, they were really strange and different totally compared to times earlier. The passenger traffic was concerning mostly to shopping. So Russian tourists went to the southeastern Finland area for shopping, for spending weekends in hotels, etc. So the economical impact has been really big, unfortunately.
Lappeenranta is a city of 73,000 and just over 20 kilometers from the Russian-Finnish border. It was a big destination spot for Russian tourists. Some estimate the South Karelia region, where Lappeenranta is located, has lost about 1 million euros a day since Russia began its war against Ukraine.
I have been living here all my life. The cafe started on 1980s. When this house was built, we were under Russian rule, and this was built as a house for young Russian officers. We have lots of foreign customers in here. Russian customers, but nowadays not so many anymore. The economical impact has been huge. I don't think that they will ever come to the same point they were before the Ukrainian war. I can easily hear people saying that this is something that Russians do, and you can never rely on Russians. And that makes me very sad because, in my opinion, the Russian administration and Russian people are so different. But there are two different sides of this story.
You grew up in an era where, globalization was an opportunity, and now people are looking more inwards.
True, but you could say that I was born into a world, the Cold War, where there was a clear ideological split between the East and the West. Authoritarian regimes and freedom. And remember, I started studying in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell in November. And then the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, and there was this sort of basic assumption that, hey, the whole world is going to be a combination of liberal democracy, social market economy, and globalization. And of course, at some stage, we sort of woke up and smelt the coffee and realized that actually the world was not going to be all about green fields and rainbows and peace signs. And for me, of course, the sort of turning point was not only 9/11 or the financial crisis 2008, but probably Russia's attack on Ukraine in 2022. And we're now starting to see the change of a world order.
But you say in 2008, you saw Russia change.
But let's all try to stay calm, cool, and collected. There's a lot of this war propaganda going around. We've been able to muster a ceasefire, and let's try to stick to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I gave a speech right after the war. We had gotten a ceasefire in 5 days where I said, we should wake up and have a look. Power politics is back, spheres of interest is back, Russian imperialism is not gone, so start adjusting. And of course, it wasn't a very kosher thing to say at the time, but I'm not happy that I was right, but that's what happened.
But no one listened.
Well, I mean, some people listened, some didn't. I think kind of a lot of Eastern European countries were right about Russia at that time. But I think we were all sort of in this wave of, Russia is going to become a democracy. We were even thinking China is going to become a democracy. And, if there is technological advancement, if there is freedom, people are going to use it. There was Arab Spring, et cetera, et cetera. But my argument, the big argument is that right now we're living in a 1918, 1945 or 1989 moment in world history. And now we're in a similar situation. We just don't know where the world is going to go.
Jonas Grönlund sits on Lappeenranta's city council. Like Stubb, before the presidency, Jonas is also a member of the National Coalition Party in Finland.
I do have Russian friends, and none of them is anymore living in Russia. They are losing now a lot of brain power. Everybody who can leave, leaves. Finland have been preparing for 80 years after Second World War against any foreign threats. Everybody understands why the border is closed, but it's economically quite hard. The most important thing is that we survive. Whatever happens, we will survive, we will do our best. We've been living next to Russia thousands and thousands of years, and it has been a struggle all the time. Only nowadays, Europe is also seeing that living next to Russia can be a problem.
You've also said that Europeans live in la-la land, that they actually don't want to see, I guess, what they have in front of them. Why is it so difficult to see?
Yeah, it's one of these things. I think sometimes it's very human. You know, we want to deal with a world that we want to see, and we are not dealing in a world which it actually exists. Remember that diplomacy and foreign policy is never static. There's no end state. You know, we're not going to end up with the fantastic world government. It's always diplomacy and trying to work in different directions. Right now, the pendulum is going towards transaction, towards nationalism, towards bilateral relations. And at some stage, it'll start swinging back. But when it starts, we have to make sure that everyone feels that they're part of it.
The golden age of America begins right now. I will very simply put America first. We are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. Sunlight is pouring over the entire world.
We'll be told that it's xenophobic. We'll be told that it's small-minded.
Ich liebe euch!
Do you worry about society splintering, the rise of populism,
Yeah, definitely.
not being able to talk to each other anymore?
Yeah, I mean, what we have to avoid is the polarization of society. We have now the technological instruments to polarize as much as we can, because we can kind of start living in not only alternative realities, but in alternative truths. And that's very dangerous for democracy, because if you don't have basic agreement of what facts are, say on science or otherwise, then you cannot have a democratic discourse. And we have to try to avoid that. We're seeing some of it, obviously, in the United States, but it's not only the United States. We're seeing it in many other liberal democracies. Finland is a small country. We can't have that.
Is Europe prepared to go to war?
Well, I mean, our mentality is that the better you're prepared, the less likely you're going to end up in a war.
Finland has a larger artillery than France and Germany combined, despite being a small country with a fraction of the German and French population. Per capita, Finland ranks 7th in the world in total military personnel number.
We have obligatory military service, so 900,000 men and women have done it. My son just finished his. I did mine in 1988 and 89. We have 280,000 that we can put out at wartime from reserves. We have 62 F-18s. We have long-range missiles, land, sea, and air. We just bought 64 F-35s. We have the biggest artillery together with Poland. And as I always say, we don't have them because we're worried about Stockholm. And our argument is that the better you're prepared, the less likely you end up.
But the rest of Europe is not prepared.
Well, I think many of them are, and many of them are waking up. We are increasing our preparedness in order to avoid the worst.
I mean, I'm sure you have good days and bad days. What do you do on a bad day to try and work things through, to try and keep level-headed?
I mean, one, you have to be really well prepared yourself. So I spend my early morning hours from about 5 to 8 going through material and reading to make sure that I'm, on the ball. And then secondly, you have to have a team which is able to inform you about every little minute detail and keep you all the time ahead of the curve. And then number 3, you have to calm down. You have to understand that the world is not going to be finished in the 6 years I'm in this office, or 12 years, depending on if I run again. You just have to take it day by day and try to solve small crises and big crises.
What do you learn from sports that you bring to politics?
You probably learn to cut your losses and actually to accept failure, because in life you're going to go through moments when you fail, and then you either learn something from it or you don't. And from endurance sports, you just learn how to grind it out. So sports, I have to admit, has always helped me. It's a big part of who I am.
Yeah, and you famously said that actually 1 hour of sports or exercise gives you 2 hours of energy. Do we need to normalize that more?
Well, normalize is difficult because I never want to be judgmental about anyone else's lifestyle. So I've been able to lead a life whereby it's been possible for the past 20, 30 years. And I think it's a lot about habits, and then suddenly they almost become an addiction. You have to be a little bit careful, but I'd say that I'm probably a better person for doing 1 hour of exercise. Albeit today I've only done half an hour.
What have you had to adapt since you become president?
I think there's certain behavioral patterns. You know, you have to perhaps hide your personality a little bit, not too much. But the reason I do it is that I respect the institution. You know, I'm the 13th president of the Republic of Finland. I understand the historic gravitas of the task. So that means that, you know, I can't in every public situation be just the good old Alex. I can do that with my friends, I can do that with my family, I can do it with my staff, but there are certain elements of the job that you just have to play the role.
But leaders also connect through personalities.
Yes.
How has that helped with President Trump, President Xi?
Well, I mean, it helps with everyone to a certain extent. I think diplomacy is really about two things. It's about state relations, and then it's about personal relations and connections. And then I think it's my job to try to connect with people. And I hope I succeed sometimes. You know, when I was with President Xi, I felt we had a very good and respectful conversation. When I was playing golf with President Trump, we had a really good time.
What was President Trump like on the golf course? You
very
played
pleasant,
for 8 hours?
Very talkative. You know, golf is a nice social setting. And again, going back to my dad, I remember my dad being very encouraging and saying, you know, Alex, even if you don't become a golf professional, golf will be useful for you one day. And I was going, yeah, sure, Dad. And sure enough, there I was on the first tee with President Trump. And, you know, I had a good time. And it doesn't, you know, the fact that you have a good time with someone doesn't mean they agree with them. Especially coming from a small country. What you want to do is you want to, you know, nudge things in the right direction. And that means that you have conversations which sometimes can be difficult and awkward. Sometimes they can be good, and then, you know, the rest of it is about getting results. And I hope I get results with my diplomacy.
But if you have a good time, does it mean that they listen to your arguments more?
I don't know. You have to ask them.
What did you learn about him? I mean, is he different?
Actually, you know, this is the thing. And I've always said this, that funnily enough, and I hadn't really played golf for 35 years. I mean, when I quit. So, but I've always said it. You learn about the personality of a human being on the first hole of a golf course. You see if they're edgy, if they are impatient, if they're frustrated, if they're fun, if they're relaxed. And I have to say, I had no uncomfortable moments during that round. And we hit good shots and bad shots. So, you know, people are quite different on a golf course sometimes.
You seem to have a quite glamorous life from the outside. What do people not know?
What I keep on telling people who say, oh, you met that person, or you met that person, and you sat next to that one, I said, listen, they're just normal human beings. See, the thing is that in today's world with modern technology, you create an image of a human being who you've never met because you've seen them on social media or TV or whatever. And it's normal. But the truth is that no human being is as bad as they look in the public eye, nor as good as they look in the public eye. And most people that I met throughout my life are just normal human beings. They like to talk about normal stuff. I'll tell you, one of the highlights of my term so far was a private dinner with President Volodymyr Zelensky and Olena Zelenskaya and my wife Suzanne at our home, in our flat, with no one else around. We were just chatting there, drinking wine, talking about family and talking about life. And you have to understand that even someone like Volodymyr Zelensky, who's gone through a war that no one wanted, and he the least of it, is a normal human being. There's no glamour in that.
President Stubb, thank you so much.
Thank you.